when I'm finished with this glass, it is more expensive for me to wash it and put it down to use it again. It is cheaper for me to throw it in the garbage and use another one. This is disposable. African slaves at one point were disposable items of production. The numbers were so great that it was easy to work a man to death than to take care of him. So, tens of millions of people died, and the Jews want to talk about a Holocaust. They tried to actually, how should we call it, brainwash these people. They tried to socially program them by putting in their minds and creating a social environment to make them think of themselves as nothing but animals, as nothing different from a horse or a cow or a sheep. And how they did that was, first of all, they weren't allowed to speak their language. They weren't allowed to practice their culture. They weren't allowed to practice their religion. They weren't allowed to have a natural family. And you could have a child, and they would take your child away whenever they wanted and do whatever they wanted with it. They thought, just like people think today, that a human being doesn't have a soul, and that you could program a human being. A human being is nothing but a sophisticated animal. And therefore, the sophisticated animal, if you take away all those things, those social things that make him human, okay, you would be reduced to an animal. And they tried this, but they were not successful. However, what they left behind was a truncated individual, was an individual that, as I say today, a lot of issues. Who am I? Am I a white man or am I a black man? Who am I? Am I American or am I African? Who am I? Is that white Jesus my God? Or is that white Jesus the European God? Who am I? What is my name? Is my name, Denzel Washington? Or is my name Barack Obama? Who am I? And this is a big problem that faces Africa. Now, among those slaves were Muslims. Quite a number of them were Muslims. And because these Muslims had a very strong sense of identification and self-knowledge, among them had many literate and educated people. Many of the slave revolts in America were led by African Muslims. Indeed, Lord knows that around the end of the 18th century, a slave revolt in Brazil, in a province called Bahia, led by Muslims, was so successful, they defeated the Portuguese army and created a caliphate in the jungle, an actual caliphate. And they used to fight the Portuguese with skills, with fighting skills that we learned from Africa, like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Okay? No one knows this. And even today now, you go to that province in Bahia, province of Bahia, you will find that people still tend to have Islamic type of behaviors, like taking their shoes off when they go into the house and so forth. No one knew this. No one knew that, for example, one of the greatest revolutions in the Western Hemisphere was the Haitian Revolution, which again was begun by Muslims and defeated the greatest superpower at the time, Napoleon. To the extent that the European was so upset with that, and he held that grudge so long that even today they insist on not making or not allowing Haiti to prosper because of that defeat that existed almost 200, 300 years ago. So Haiti now, unfortunately, is one of the poorest countries in the Caribbean. And it is not because of the revolution, it is because of the dislike of the European community and America for a black group of people, ex-slaves, to defeat the biggest superpower at the time, the great French army of Napoleon. And so you found in the history of the African American in America many examples of Muslims rising up to fight oppression and being successful. In Trinidad, you found that after the slavery, there was a West India Muslim organization that was very much involved in tabligh, spreading Islam among the people. You know the British got rid of them? Well, they waited for them to be praying and join up prayer, and they came in with machine guns and mowed them all down. So we had this great idea that Islam was a means whereby we can reestablish ourselves. And you're talking about people who have an identity crisis. There are people who have been fed with this idea that Africa was a place of no civilization and savagery and so forth and so on. People who wanted to stay away from their own roots. And so we started to gradually move back towards Islam. And this motion back towards Islam reached the highest point. One of the highest points was in the emergence of a man by the name called Malcolm X, or Shaheed Malcolm X, or Shaheed Malik al-Shabazz. At this point, Malcolm X came up with he himself became a Muslim. He came up with the idea that Islam is the way to be able to fight oppression. You see, oppression is not just economic. People like us to think this. Oppression is not just economic. Oppression is not just political. Oppression is also a way of life. If you have the oppressed being concerned about things that don't matter, it's easy to oppress it. In the time of slavery, it was alcohol. Today, it's drugs. Today, it's music. Today, it's sex. Today, it's fashion. Today, it's consumerism. So people are moving towards the biggest concern being if I can get enough money to buy the iPhone 5 when it comes out. Or, did you hear about that new Nike shoes that goes for $160? You see? You got people with the earphones on, just going like this throughout the whole day. No time to think. And these are the tools of oppression. And one of the peoples that these tools are propagated with the most intensity is among the African community. Why? Because they're the most potentially revolutionary communities in the United States of America. And if these people wake up, they can turn the whole country upside down. They know that the youth, regardless of color, in every society, are the most active, the most truth-loving, the most justice-loving of everybody else in society. How do you keep the youth quiet? You keep them quiet by listening to foolishness. You keep them quiet by being concerned about what kind of clothes they wear. You keep them quiet by being upset because they don't have a girlfriend. That's how you keep youth occupied and you keep them distracted. That riot we had in London a few months ago, okay, that riot started with a protest for something true. It started with a protest against police brutality and police injustice. But because most of the youth were not well educated to know what their goals and aims are, it turned into a riot free-for-all. It turned into busting down stores to do what? To grab shoes and to grab iPods and all these types of things. I saw a picture of one neighborhood where all the stores were destroyed except one bookstore. The bookstore was intact. Nobody touched the bookstore. Check that out. They were all ignorant. They all were not the people who were to study. They were aware that such injustice took place. They were aware that the banks are stealing their money. They were aware that those banks brought the economy to